Black woman missed her train to help an old man. Never knew that kindness would change her life forever. It was a rainy morning in Atlanta, the kind where the sky looked heavy and the air smelled like wet concrete. The train station buzzed with hurried footsteps and dripping umbrellas as people rushed past each other, desperate not to be late. Among them was Danielle Brooks, a young black woman in her late 20s, wearing her best suit for a job interview she had dreamed about for months. She had studied hard, sacrificed sleep, and even skipped meals to prepare for this day. Her heart raced as she saw the digital clock flashing 8:59 a.m., one more minute before her train departed. Clutching her purse, she sprinted toward the platform, her heels tapping sharply against the tiles. But just as she was about to step inside, she heard a faint voice calling, weak and strained. Turning around, she saw an old man with a bent back and trembling hands struggling to lift his suitcase. Everyone around him passed without a glance, too busy with their own lives to care. Danielle froze, torn between compassion and ambition. If she helped, she'd miss her train. If she didn't, she'd carry the guilt all day. Taking a deep breath, she turned away from the train and hurried toward the man. "Let me help you, sir," she said gently, lifting his heavy bag and guiding him to a nearby bench. Just then, the train doors slid shut behind her with a cold, metallic thud. She had missed it. Her chance gone in a heartbeat. For a moment, disappointment washed over her like the rain outside, but when the man looked up and smiled softly, whispering, "Thank you, child. You're an angel," something inside her shifted. The man's name was Henry Wallace, a retired principal on his way to visit his late wife's grave. His hands shook as he spoke, but his words carried warmth and wisdom. When Danielle told him she had missed her interview because she stopped to help, his eyes filled with guilt and gratitude. "I'm sorry, dear," he said, handing her a small card. "If you ever need help, call this number. Tell them Henry Wallace sent you." She smiled politely and slipped the card into her bag, not thinking much of it. But that night, as she sat alone in her apartment replaying the day, her eyes landed on the card again. It read, Wallace Foundation for Education, Executive Board. Her heart skipped. The next morning, she called the number and was invited for a meeting. When she arrived, she realized Mr. Wallace wasn't just an old principal. He was the founder of a massive education foundation. He told her, "You showed kindness when the world didn't. That's the kind of heart we need." Weeks later, Danielle stood on stage as the new director of youth mentorship, with Mr. Wallace smiling proudly in the front row. Sometimes missing one train can lead you exactly where you were meant to go. The man smiled kindly and introduced himself as Henry Wallace, his voice trembling but full of warmth. He explained that he had once been a school principal but was now retired, living alone since his wife had passed away. That morning, he had come to the city to visit her grave, but the rain and his old age had slowed him down. Danielle listened quietly, her heart softening as he spoke. The weight of her missed interview still pressed against her chest, but as she looked at the frail man before her, she couldn't bring herself to feel regret. She offered him her umbrella and even bought him a cup of coffee from the nearby stall. They sat on the bench together, the sound of trains roaring by filling the silence between them. After a few moments, Mr. Wallace looked at her with gentle eyes and asked why she looked so worried. Danielle hesitated, then confessed that she had missed an important interview because she stopped to help him. His smile faded, replaced by deep guilt. "I'm so sorry, dear," he said softly. "I didn't mean to cost you something so important." Danielle quickly shook her head and smiled faintly. "It's okay, sir. Maybe it just wasn't meant to be," she replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. The old man sighed and reached into the inner pocket of his worn-out coat. After fumbling for a moment, he pulled out a small business card, slightly bent at the edges, and handed it to her. "I may not have much to give, but call this number tomorrow," he said with sincerity. "Tell them Henry Wallace sent you." Danielle looked at the card politely, not wanting to seem ungrateful, and slipped it into her purse. "Thank you, sir," she said, though she didn't believe anything would come of it. After all, what could an elderly stranger possibly do to help her career? When the next train arrived, she helped him aboard, waved goodbye, and stood alone on the platform watching the rain fall heavier than before. That night, back in her small apartment, Danielle replayed the day in her head. She felt defeated, wondering how one small act of kindness had turned her life upside down. She poured herself tea, sat by the window, and sighed. Then, as she reached for her phone, something caught her eye. The card she had tucked into her purse earlier. She picked it up and read the text carefully. Wallace Foundation for Education. Executive Board. Her eyes widened, her pulse quickened. Could it be the same Henry Wallace she met at the station? She quickly searched his name online, and her jaw dropped when she saw his photo. The same man, smiling beside government officials and community leaders. Danielle stared in disbelief, her heart pounding as she realized that the man she had helped wasn't just anyone. He was one of the most respected educators in the state. Her small act of compassion had unknowingly connected her to a destiny far greater than she imagined. The next morning, Danielle sat on the edge of her bed, holding the business card between her fingers, wondering if she should call the number. Part of her thought it would lead nowhere, that it was just a polite gesture from an old man who felt guilty for her missed train. But something deep inside urged her to try. She took a deep breath and dialed. A woman answered with a professional tone. Wallace Foundation for Education. How may I help you? Danielle hesitated for a second before speaking. Hello, my name is Danielle Brooks. Mr. Henry Wallace told me to call. There was a short silence, followed by a sudden change in the woman's voice, now softer, respectful. Oh, Mr. Wallace mentioned you. Can you come to our office today? Danielle's heart skipped a beat as she quickly agreed. She got dressed, trying to calm the rush of excitement and uncertainty. When she arrived at the Foundation's headquarters downtown, she froze for a moment. The building was enormous, its walls covered with photographs of smiling children, schools being built, and portraits of Henry Wallace and his late wife. It hit her then. He wasn't just a retired principal. He was a visionary philanthropist who had dedicated his life to education and community development. As she walked through the marble hallway, she saw people greeting her with respect, already aware of who she was. Then, the door to the boardroom opened, and there stood Mr. Wallace, dressed neatly, his warm eyes lighting up as he saw her. You came, he said with a proud smile. I told you yesterday, kindness always finds its way back. Danielle felt overwhelmed as he introduced her to the board members, explaining how she had stopped her own busy day to help a stranger in need. We need people like her, he said firmly, people who lead not just with ambition, but with compassion. The board members nodded, clearly moved by his words. Danielle tried to speak, but her throat tightened. They asked her about her background, her dreams, and her passion for youth education. Every answer seemed to resonate deeply with them. When the meeting ended, Mr. Wallace looked at her and said, Danielle, I'd like to offer you something better than a job interview. I'd like you to join our team as the Director of Youth Mentorship. Danielle's eyes filled with tears. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had missed her train, but destiny had led her to something far greater. As she shook Mr. Wallace's hand, she realized that a single moment of kindness had rewritten the story of her life. Later, as she stood outside the building, the sunlight breaking through the fading rain clouds, she whispered to herself, sometimes missing one opportunity means finding the one that was meant for you all along. Months later, the rain had turned into sunlight, and Danielle Brooks stood beneath the golden glow of chandeliers at a grand charity gala organized by the Wallace Foundation. The room was filled with city leaders, educators, and community volunteers, all gathered to celebrate the success of their new youth mentorship program, one Danielle now led with pride and passion. As she stepped up to the podium, her heart swelled with emotion. She looked out into the crowd and saw Mr. Henry Wallace sitting in the front row, his kind eyes shining with quiet pride. Taking a deep breath, Danielle began to speak. Her voice carried through the hall, calm yet powerful. She spoke about the morning she missed her train, about how she thought her life had fallen apart in that one small act of kindness. Sometimes, she said, her voice trembling slightly, missing what you think you want is the universe's way of giving you what you truly deserve. The audience fell silent, captivated by her sincerity. As she continued, Danielle shared how her encounter with a stranger had taught her that real success isn't about how fast you get somewhere. It's about who you choose to help along the way. Her words resonated deeply, and when she finished, the crowd erupted into applause, some even standing to honor her journey. Mr. Wallace slowly made his way to the stage, his cane tapping softly against the polished floor. When he reached her, he smiled with fatherly affection and pulled a small silver locket from his pocket. He pressed it gently into her hands. "This belonged to my late wife," he said softly. "Inside it reads, 'For those who give without expecting.' I think she'd want you to have it." Danielle's eyes welled with tears as she opened the locket and read the engraving. The words struck her like a warm embrace from the universe itself. She whispered a trembling thank you and hugged Mr. Wallace, the crowd watching a living testament to how one small choice could change everything. That rainy morning at the train station no longer felt like a moment of loss. It had become the beginning of everything beautiful in her life. Later that evening, as the gala ended and people began to leave, Danielle stepped outside into the cool night air. She looked up at the stars, the same sky that had once poured rain on her that fateful day, and smiled. The world had come full circle. A single act of compassion had rippled into countless lives, inspiring others to lead with heart, not haste. As she walked away, clutching the locket close to her chest, she whispered, "Kindness always finds its way back."